You can significantly lower your blood pressure readings in just a few minutes right now without taking an extra pill, simply by changing the mechanical way you use your diaphragm. However, the problem is that most seniors carry a hidden, chronic tension in their upper chest that keeps their numbers artificially high, even when they believe they are completely relaxed. I'm Dr. Ben Harris, and today I am going to teach you exactly how to unlock that tension. Many people attempt deep breathing to lower their pressure, but they often perform the steps in the wrong order or with the wrong intensity, which can inadvertently signal the body to increase pressure rather than drop it. The sequence is critical. I will show you the most effective method, but first you must understand the foundational error that prevents most people from seeing results. Arthur came to see me because he was frustrated and confused by his home readings. At 72 years old, Arthur was the model patient. He took his medication exactly on time every morning. He walked around his neighborhood faithfully. He avoided salty snacks and had even cut down on red meat. Yet, every time he sat down to check his blood pressure in the afternoon, the top number would hover around 150, refusing to budge. He told me he felt calm. He told me he was sitting still. But when I watched him breathe, I saw the problem immediately. Arthur was breathing entirely with his shoulders and upper chest. Every time he took a breath in, his shoulders would rise up toward his ears, and his chest would puff out. His stomach remained tight and flat. Without realizing it, Arthur was keeping his body in a constant state of low-grade emergency. This style of breathing, often called apical or chest breathing, sends a direct signal to the nervous system that you are in danger, keeping the blood vessels constricted and the pressure high. We had to retrain his body to switch from that emergency signal to a safety signal. This is the foundation of the diaphragmatic reset. The diaphragm is a large, dome-shaped muscle that sits at the base of your lungs. When you use it correctly, it acts as a natural pump that stimulates the vagus nerve. The vagus nerve is the longest nerve of the autonomic nervous system, and it is the key to turning off the fight-or-flight response that spikes your blood pressure. When Arthur learned to disengage his shoulders and engage his diaphragm, his afternoon readings dropped by 10 points within a week, simply because he stopped sending a panic signal to his own heart. To do this correctly, you need to verify where your breath is going. You can do this right now while you are sitting there. Place one hand flat on your upper chest, right near your collarbone. Place the other hand flat on your belly, right near your belly button. Now take a breath. If the hand on your chest moves up, you are likely signaling stress to your arteries. The goal is to keep the hand on your chest perfectly still. Imagine it is glued in place. Now, as you inhale, try to push only the hand on your belly outward. It should feel like you are inflating a balloon inside your stomach. The chest stays quiet. The shoulders stay down. Only the belly moves. This takes practice because, for many of us, chest breathing has become a decades-long habit. But the biological impact is immediate. When the belly expands, the diaphragm drops, allowing the lungs to fill from the bottom up. This mechanical action stimulates the vagus nerve, which tells your heart to slow down and your blood vessels to relax. It is a physical override switch for stress. Start by practicing this for just 1 minute at a time. Do not force the air. If you force it, you create tension. Just gently invite the air down to the belly. If you feel lightheaded at any point, return to your normal breathing immediately. This reset is not about holding your breath, it is about changing the location of the breath. Once Arthur mastered this, he realized that he had been holding his stomach in for years due to posture habits, which was physically preventing his blood pressure from coming down. By letting his belly go soft and directing the breath there, he finally saw the reward for all his other healthy habits. Comment your age and your usual top number range below. It helps us see the variety of people working on this together. Clara was 68, and she had a very specific trigger for her blood pressure spikes. She could be perfectly fine all day, gardening or reading, but the moment she saw the blood pressure cuff, her heart rate would accelerate. She described it as a flutter in her chest that she couldn't control. She would put the cuff on, and before the machine even started squeezing, she was already anticipating a bad number. This anxiety created a self-fulfilling prophecy. Her heart would beat faster, her vessels would clamp down, and the screen would show a number far higher than her true baseline. She would see the high number, panic more, and take it again, only to see it go even higher. It was a vicious cycle of reactive measurement. We needed a way to interrupt that panic response instantly, something that would force her heart rhythm to stabilize before she pressed the start button. We used a technique called the rhythmic box pattern. The heart does not beat like a metronome. It speeds up slightly when you inhale and slows down slightly when you exhale. This is normal. However, when you are anxious or tense, this variability becomes chaotic. The box pattern works by equalizing every part of the breath cycle: the inhale, the pause, the exhale, and the pause. This symmetry forces your nervous system to synchronize with your breath, smoothing out the heart rate and reducing the immediate spike of adrenaline that comes from anxiety. Here is how you do it. Picture a square box. Each side of the box represents a count of 4. Side 1 is your inhale. Breathe in through your nose deeply and slowly for a count of 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Side 2 is a hold. Hold that breath gently for a count of 4. Do not clamp your throat shut. Just suspend the breath. 1, 2, 3, 4. Side 3 is your exhale. Release the breath slowly through your mouth for a count of 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 3. Side 4 is the final hold. Wait with your lungs empty for a count of 4 before breathing in again. 1, 2, 3, 4. Clara started doing this specific pattern for 2 minutes before she even touched her blood pressure cuff. She would sit at her table, look at the machine, but not touch it. She would do the box pattern. This gave her brain a task to focus on other than the fear of the number. By the time she finished the cycles, her heart rate had steadied, and her blood pressure reading reflected her true health, not her momentary panic. This technique is powerful because it demands your full attention. You cannot worry about the number 160 while you are counting to 4 and visualizing a box. It occupies the mind and calms the body simultaneously. A safety note here: if holding your breath for 4 seconds feels uncomfortable or makes you gasp for air on the next inhale, shorten the count to 3. The goal is rhythm, not struggle. If you have any respiratory issues that make holding your breath difficult, simply skip the holding parts and focus on making the inhale and exhale equal in length. This leads us to a crucial modification for those who struggle with sleep, which is often when blood pressure does its most damage without us knowing. James was 75 and had a problem that is very common among men his age. He would have decent blood pressure readings during the morning, but in the evening, right before bed, his numbers would creep up. He also found it difficult to fall asleep. He would lay in bed and his mind would race with thoughts about the next day, or worries about his house, or replaying conversations from years ago. This mental chatter was keeping his sympathetic nervous system, the fight or flight system, active late into the night. Nighttime is when your blood pressure should naturally dip to its lowest point to allow your heart to recover. This is called dipping. If your pressure stays high at night, it puts significant strain on your cardiovascular system. James was a non-dipper because he couldn't switch his engine off. We introduced him to the extended exhale, sometimes known as the 4-7-8 variation, but for James, we simplified it to focus purely on the ratio. The science behind this is fascinating but simple. When you inhale, you are engaging a very slight amount of sympathetic activation. It is the gas pedal. When you exhale, you are engaging the parasympathetic response, the brake pedal. If your inhales and exhales are the same length, you are coasting. But if you want to slow the car down effectively, you need to press the brake longer than you press the gas. By deliberately making the exhale significantly longer than the inhale, you are physically forcing your heart rate to slow down. You are sending a chemical signal to your brain that says, "We are safe, we can rest." James began using this technique sitting on the edge of his bed every night. He would inhale quietly through his nose for a count of 4. Then he would purse his lips slightly, as if he were blowing out a candle very slowly, and exhale for a count of 8. The count does not have to be exact seconds. The ratio is what matters. The exhale should be roughly double the length of the inhale. In for 4, out for 8. In for 3, out for 6. whatever is comfortable for you. When James did this, he noticed that after about 5 or 6 cycles, his eyelids felt heavy, his shoulders dropped, the racing thoughts slowed down because his body was entering a state of sedation naturally. By lowering his evening arousal levels, his nighttime blood pressure began to stabilize, and his morning numbers improved as a result. You can use this extended exhale anytime you feel a sudden spike of stress or anger. If you receive bad news, or if you are stuck in traffic, or if you feel that flush of heat that comes with frustration, immediately switch to a short inhale and a very long, slow exhale. It acts as an emergency brake for your blood pressure response. If you are finding these techniques helpful, please consider subscribing to the channel. It helps me continue to provide this information to seniors who need it. Now, breathing is the engine, but there is another factor that ruins readings even for people who breathe perfectly. This is perhaps the most common mistake I see in my practice. Martha was 80 years old and lived alone, so she cherished the social interaction she had with her doctors and nurses. Even at home, when her daughter would come over to help her check her blood pressure, Martha would use that time to chat. She would tell her daughter about the neighbors or what she needed from the grocery store, all while the cuff was wrapped around her arm and the machine was inflating. Martha's numbers were consistently high, pushing into the 160s. She was worried she would need more medication. But when she described her routine to me, she mentioned, "I was telling my daughter about the garden while we waited for the number." That was the clue. Talking while taking your blood pressure can raise your systolic reading, the top number, by 10 to 15 points. It requires effort from your body to project your voice, and the emotional content of what you are saying can also trigger a response. Furthermore, listening actively to someone else talking to you can also raise your pressure. We implemented the quiet cuff technique with Martha. This is not just about silence. It is about a total sensory quiet down that pairs with the breathing we just discussed. The rule became strict. 5 minutes of absolute silence before the cuff inflates. No talking, no listening to the radio, no watching the news on television. Martha had to sit in her chair with her feet flat on the floor, uncrossed because crossing your legs can also raise pressure by several points. Her back had to be supported by the chair. Her arm had to be resting on a table at heart level. And during this 5-minute prep time, she practiced the diaphragmatic reset we talked about in step 1. She treated it like a medical procedure, not a casual check-in. She sat. She breathed into her belly. She kept her mouth closed. She cleared her mind. When she finally pressed the button, she remained silent during the measurement. The result? Her reading was 135. It was still elevated, but it was 25 points lower than when she was chatting. She didn't need more medication. She needed a proper measurement protocol. The quiet cuff technique ensures that the number you see on the screen is your actual blood pressure, not a reflection of your conversation or your posture. It is impossible to know if your breathing exercises are working if your measurement technique is flawed. You must isolate the variable. If you have been measuring your pressure while sitting on the couch watching TV or while chatting with a spouse, you likely do not know your true blood pressure. Try the quiet cuff method tomorrow morning. Sit for 5 minutes. Breathe into your belly. Say nothing, then measure. You might be surprised by how much lower the number is. Many people ignore this because they think, well, I want to know what my pressure is during normal life. That is a misunderstanding. The guidelines for healthy blood pressure are based on resting readings. We expect pressure to go up when you are talking or walking. We need to know if it comes down when you rest. If you never truly rest during the measurement, you are diagnosing yourself with a condition you might not have to the severity you think. This leads us to a hidden physiological trigger that mimics stress in the body. You can breathe perfectly, sit quietly, and still have high numbers if you are missing this one simple element that many seniors neglect. Robert was a gentleman of 70 who came to my clinic with a binder full of blood pressure logs. He was doing the breathing exercises we discussed. He was sitting quietly. He was taking his medication, but his baseline numbers refused to drop below 145. He felt sluggish, his head often felt heavy in the afternoons, and he noticed his skin felt dry and papery. When I asked him about his fluid intake, he shrugged and said, "I drink coffee in the morning, and I have a small glass of juice with dinner. I'm just not that thirsty during the day." This is the silent saboteur of blood pressure in older adults: dehydration. As we age, our natural thirst signal fades. You can be significantly dehydrated and not feel thirsty in the way you did when you were 30, but your blood vessels feel it immediately. Think of your cardiovascular system like a plumbing system. If the water running through the pipes is thin and free-flowing, the pump, your heart, doesn't have to work very hard to move it. But if you are dehydrated, your blood volume drops, and the blood itself becomes slightly thicker, more viscous, almost like syrup compared to water. To push this thicker fluid through the same tiny vessels, your heart has to pump with much more force, raising your pressure. Furthermore, when the body senses dehydration, it releases a hormone called vasopressin. The job of vasopressin is to hold onto water, but it achieves this by constricting your blood vessels. So, by not drinking enough water, Robert was inadvertently causing his own arteries to clamp down, fighting against the very medication he was taking to open them up. No amount of deep breathing can fully overcome a system that is chemically constricted due to lack of fluid. We made one simple change to Robert's routine. We didn't overhaul his entire diet overnight. We just added the hydration breath connection. Every time Robert sat down to do his breathing exercises, he had to drink one full glass of water 20 minutes before he started. Why 20 minutes? Because it takes about that long for the fluid to be absorbed and for the body to register that it is hydrated, allowing the vasopressin levels to drop and the vessels to relax. By the time he sat down to breathe and measure, his blood was flowing more freely, and his vessels were naturally more open. Within 3 days of adding this pre-measurement hydration, Robert's numbers dropped by 8 points. He wasn't doing anything different with his lungs. He was simply giving his heart a fluid that was easier to pump. This is a critical safety note. If you have kidney issues or heart failure where your doctor has specifically restricted your fluid intake, you must follow their guidance on how much water to drink. But for the vast majority of seniors, we are chronically underhydrated. You can try this tomorrow. Before you do your morning breathing routine, drink a tall glass of room temperature water. Wait 20 minutes while you get washed and dressed, then sit and breathe. You are preparing the terrain for the breathing to work. Comment yes below if you currently drink a glass of water first thing in the morning. If you don't, I want you to try it starting tomorrow. This next method combines movement with breath, and it was the key for Eleanor. Eleanor was 65 and had developed a fear of movement. She had been told by a well-meaning friend that walking around would raise her blood pressure, so she spent most of her day sitting in her recliner to keep her numbers down. While it is true that pressure rises during exercise, this is a healthy, temporary response. By avoiding movement, Eleanor was causing her arteries to stiffen. Rigid arteries cause high blood pressure. We needed to get her moving, but we needed to do it in a way that kept her calm and kept her pressure controlled. We introduced the walk and breathe rhythm. This is not power walking. This is not jogging. This is a deliberate synchronization of your footsteps with your respiratory rate. When you walk rhythmically, your leg muscles act as a second heart. As they contract, they squeeze the veins in your legs, pushing blood back up to the heart. This takes a massive workload off your heart muscle. When you combine this with rhythmic breathing, you create a surge of nitric oxide. Nitric oxide is a gas produced inside your arteries that signals the muscle walls to relax and widen. It is the body's natural vasodilator. Here is the pattern Eleanor used, and it is the one I want you to try. It is called the 4-step rhythm. Go for a walk on a flat surface, a hallway, a driveway, or a quiet sidewalk. As you take 4 steps, left, right, inhale slowly through your nose. Step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, inhaling smoothly. Then, for the next 4 steps, exhale smoothly through your mouth. Step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, exhaling completely. In for 4 steps, out for 4 steps. Eleanor found this difficult at first because her mind wanted to rush, but by forcing her feet to match her breath, she entered a state of flow. The rhythmic motion calmed her anxiety about exercise. She wasn't gasping for air. She was controlling the air. After a 10-minute walk using this rhythm, Eleanor would return home and sit for 5 minutes to recover. When she checked her pressure then, it was lower than it had been when she was sitting in her recliner all day. The combination of muscle activation and rhythmic breathing had flushed her system with nitric oxide, keeping her pressure down for hours afterward. You can do this anywhere. You can do this while walking to the mailbox. You can do this while walking around your kitchen island. The goal is not speed. The goal is synchronization. If 4 steps feels too long, try 3 steps in, 3 steps out. Find the rhythm that lets you walk without panting. A gentle reminder: if you ever feel chest pain, severe shortness of breath, or dizziness while walking, stop immediately and sit down. But for most people, this rhythmic walking is the safest way to reintroduce exercise because the breathing ensures you never overexert yourself. If you are finding this helpful, take a moment to subscribe. It is a small action that helps me connect with more people who are trying to manage their health naturally. 7. Finally, we must address the bridge between blood pressure and blood sugar. These two numbers are often treated as separate problems, but in the body of an older adult, they are intimately connected by one major factor: stress. David was 74. He came to me because he noticed a disturbing pattern. He was monitoring both his blood sugar and his blood pressure. He noticed that whenever his grandchildren came to visit, which he loved, but which was also chaotic and loud, his blood pressure would spike. That was expected. But he also noticed that his blood sugar would jump up by 30 or 40 points, even if he hadn't eaten anything. He asked me, "Dr. Ben, how can my sugar go up if I haven't eaten?" The answer is the stress hormone cortisol. When you get stressed, your body thinks you are about to run a race or fight a tiger. To help you do that, your body dumps stored sugar, glucose, into your bloodstream to give you quick energy. At the same time, it clamps your blood vessels to increase pressure so that blood moves faster. So, stress simultaneously creates high blood sugar and high blood pressure. You cannot fix one without addressing the stress that drives both. For David, we used a specific breathing technique called the physiological sigh to break this stress bridge instantly. This is arguably the fastest way to offload carbon dioxide and lower stress hormones in real time. It looks like this. You take a double inhale through the nose. The first inhale is long and deep. Then, without exhaling, you take a second, tiny sip of air on top to fully inflate the lungs. Then, you release a long, sighing exhale through the mouth. Inhale, and another sip, and a long sigh out. The double inhale pops open the tiny sacs in your lungs called alveoli, which can collapse when we are stressed or shallow breathing. Opening them up allows you to offload much more carbon dioxide on the exhale. Removing that carbon dioxide rapidly calms the nervous system. David started doing this the moment the house got loud. He would go into the kitchen, pretend to make tea, and do 3 physiological sighs. That's it, just 3. By catching the stress response early, he prevented the cortisol spike. Because the cortisol didn't spike, his liver didn't dump sugar into his blood, and his vessels didn't clamp down. His readings remained stable, and he was able to enjoy his family without the physical toll. This is the power of understanding your body. It is not just about the lungs. It is about how the lungs talk to the heart, how the heart talks to the kidneys, and how the brain signals the liver. Lydia was a 77-year-old retired choir teacher who came to me with a unique problem. She had read about the benefits of nasal breathing, which we discussed earlier, but she found that her sinuses were often congested, making it difficult to breathe through her nose comfortably. Because of this congestion, she defaulted to mouth breathing, especially when she was reading or watching television. Mouth breathing is a disaster for blood pressure. When you breathe through your mouth, you bypass the nasal sinuses, where the body produces a miracle gas called nitric oxide. Nitric oxide is a vasodilator. It tells the muscles around your arteries to relax and open up. When you breathe through your mouth, you produce almost none of it. Lydia's blood pressure was consistently hovering in the 150s, largely because her arteries were deprived of this natural relaxant. We needed a way to not only clear her sinuses, but to supercharge her nitric oxide production. We used a technique called the humming exhale. The science here is incredibly strong. Research has shown that humming, creating a vibration in the nasal cavity, can increase nitric oxide production by 15 times compared to silent exhalation. That is a massive dose of natural medication that you can create yourself. The vibration physically shakes the air in the sinuses, mixing it with the nitric oxide, so that when you inhale next, you pull that potent gas deep into your lungs and into your bloodstream. Lydia began a simple routine. 3 times a day, she would sit in her armchair. She would take a normal breath in through her nose. Then, keeping her mouth closed, she would exhale while making a low, rumbling sound. She focused on feeling the buzz in her nose and lips. She did this for 5 minutes. The vibration helped open her sinuses, making nasal breathing easier, but more importantly, it flushed her system with nitric oxide. Within 2 weeks, her resting blood pressure dropped by 12 points. She described feeling a wave of calm wash over her after just a few hums. You can try this safely at home. Sit comfortably, inhale through your nose, keep your lips gently sealed. Exhale and make a sound like a bumblebee. Pitch it low. A lower pitch creates more vibration. Do this for 6 to 10 breaths. A quick social tip. Lydia found it embarrassing to do this around people, so she did it in the bathroom or while she was alone in the kitchen. It doesn't matter where you do it, as long as you create the vibration. It is a powerful way to chemically open your arteries using sound. Frank was 69 years old and had been a mechanic his entire life. He was used to working with his hands. When he retired, he stopped using his hands for heavy work, and strangely, his blood pressure began to climb. He felt restless and tense. He told me, "Dr. Ben, I feel like I have all this energy in my arms that has nowhere to go." We utilized a technique that combines breathing with something called isometric resistance. There is a well-established connection between grip strength and blood pressure control. When you squeeze something hard and then release it, you create a shear stress in the arteries that triggers a rebound dilation. The arteries spring open wider than they were before. We taught Frank the grip and release breath. This is different from the relaxation breathing we did earlier. This is an active pump. Frank would sit with a small rubber ball in each hand. You can also use a rolled-up washcloth. On the inhale, he would squeeze the balls as hard as he safely could for a count of 4. Squeeze, squeeze, squeeze. On the exhale, he would completely let go, opening his hands wide and relaxing his arms for a count of 8. The magic happens on the release. As he let go of the tension and exhaled, his brain received a massive signal of release. By alternating high tension with total relaxation, he was training his blood vessels to be elastic rather than rigid. Frank did this for 10 minutes while watching the evening news. It satisfied his need to use his hands, but it also lowered his systolic pressure by nearly 15 points over a month. It works because it forces the body to practice the transition from stress, the squeeze, to safety, the release. If you have severe arthritis or carpal tunnel syndrome, be gentle. You do not need to squeeze to the point of pain. Just engaging the muscles is enough. If you have uncontrolled high blood pressure, over 180/110, ask your doctor before doing heavy isometric squeezing. But for most seniors, a moderate squeeze is perfectly safe and highly effective. Samuel was 82 and suffered from a very specific timing issue. His blood pressure was perfect all day, but when he woke up in the morning, it was sky high. This is known as the morning surge, and while a small surge is normal, Samuel's was dangerous. He was a back sleeper. When we analyzed his situation, we realized that sleeping on his back was causing his tongue to fall back slightly, creating mild resistance in his airway. Not full apnea, but enough to make his body work harder to breathe all night. This struggle meant his sympathetic nervous system never truly turned off. He was waking up exhausted and hypertensive. We couldn't change his anatomy, but we could change his gravity. We introduced the left side reset. The heart is located slightly to the left in the chest cavity. The aorta, the big artery that leaves the heart, arches to the left. When you lie on your left side, you are physically assisting the heart. Gravity helps the blood drain from the heart down into the descending aorta. It requires less pressure to pump. Samuel started a new routine. Before he got out of bed in the morning to check his pressure, he would roll onto his left side. He would place a pillow between his knees to align his hips. This is crucial for comfort. In this position, he would perform the diaphragmatic breathing we learned in step 1 for 5 minutes. By lying on his left side, he maximized blood flow efficiency. By breathing deeply, he calmed the morning adrenaline spike. The result was that his scary morning numbers disappeared. He wasn't waking up in a panic anymore. He was waking up, rolling over, and gently waking up his parasympathetic nervous system before demanding anything from his body. If you are a senior who wakes up with a pounding heart, do not jump out of bed. Roll to the left. Give your heart 5 minutes of gravity-assisted rest. Breathe into the belly. Then, and only then, sit up slowly. Patricia, at 71, had a blood pressure problem that was tied directly to her eyes. This sounds strange, but it is a powerful neurological link. Patricia was a seamstress. She spent hours every day staring intensely at a tiny point, the needle of her sewing machine. When we stare at a fixed point with intense focus, focal vision, it activates the sympathetic nervous system. It signals alertness and stress. We see this today with seniors who spend hours staring at smartphones or tablets. That narrow, intense gaze locks the neck muscles and raises blood pressure. Patricia would finish sewing and immediately check her pressure, and it would be high. She thought it was the work, but it was the way she was looking. We taught her the panoramic gaze breath. The technique is simple. You keep your head still, facing forward. Then, you soften your eyes. Instead of looking at one sharp point, you try to see the walls on the far left and far right of the room at the same time without moving your eyeballs. You dilate your vision to take in the whole room, peripheral vision. When you switch to panoramic vision, you mechanically trigger a relaxation circuit in the brainstem. It is almost impossible to be stressed when you are in panoramic vision. Patricia learned to take vision breaks. Every 20 minutes of sewing, she would stop, look up, soften her eyes to see the whole room, and take 3 long exhales. She reported that she could feel the tension drain out of her neck and shoulders instantly. For you, this is vital if you spend time on a computer, knitting, or reading. If you find yourself furrowing your brow and staring hard, stop, soften your gaze. Look at the horizon or the corners of the room. Breathe out. This signals to your brain that the threat is gone, and your pressure will follow the signal. George was 76 and a type 2 diabetic. His concern was the dangerous interplay between his post-dinner relaxation and his blood sugar. George loved to eat a hearty dinner and then sit immediately in his recliner to watch sports. This habit was a double blow. Because he wasn't moving, his blood sugar would spike as the food digested. Because his blood sugar spiked, his blood thickened. Because he was sitting still, his blood pressure rose to push that thick blood. He was creating a nightly hypertensive event. We introduced the digestive stroll breath. This is a specific variation of the walking we discussed earlier, but the timing is the only thing that matters. The rule was, he had to move within 30 minutes of finishing his last bite of food. He didn't have to go far, he just had to do laps around his living room or back patio for 10 minutes. During this walk, he used a double exhale rhythm. He would inhale for 2 steps and exhale for 4 steps. In, out, 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 out. This specific rhythm does 2 things. First, the movement activates the GLUT4 receptors in the muscles, which pull sugar out of the blood without needing insulin. This stops the sugar spike. Second, the long exhale prevents the heart rate from rising too high during the digestion process. George saw his post-dinner blood sugar numbers drop by 40 points on the first night. His bedtime blood pressure, which used to be his highest of the day, dropped by 15 points. He didn't change his food, he changed his physiology after the food. If you have high sugar and high pressure, you must not sit down immediately after a large meal. Give your body 10 minutes of rhythmic movement. It clears the glucose and relaxes the vessels simultaneously. Margaret, aged 80, came to me feeling defeated. She was doing everything right: diet, meds, walking. But she suffered from white coat hypertension, not just at the doctor's office, but even in her own home. She had become so obsessed with the numbers that she was checking her blood pressure 10 times a day. She would check it. It would be 145. She would worry. She would check it 5 minutes later. It would be 148. She would panic. She would check it again. 152. She was in a checking loop. The act of checking was the stressor. We had to establish the rule of 3 and done. This is a psychological boundary that protects your physical health. The protocol is this: you sit, you do your breathing preparation, the reset or box breathing. You take the first measurement. You discard it. The first one is almost always high due to the adjustment reaction of the arm. You wait 1 minute, breathing gently. You take the second measurement. Write it down. You wait 1 minute. You take the third measurement. Write it down. Then, and this is the most important part, you average the last 2, put the machine away, and you do not touch it again until the next scheduled time, usually the next morning. Margaret had to learn that checking more often does not lower the pressure, it raises it. By giving herself permission to stop checking, her general anxiety levels plummeted. Within a week of strictly following the 3 and done rule, her morning averages began to drift down because she wasn't going to bed worrying about the machine. You must treat the monitor as a tool, not a judge. Use it correctly, then put it away. Your blood pressure fluctuates thousands of times a day. You do not need to chase every fluctuation. You need the trend. Conclusion. We have covered a tremendous amount of ground today. You now have a comprehensive, senior-friendly toolkit that addresses the mechanical, chemical, and psychological roots of high blood pressure and blood sugar. Let's review the hierarchy of what you can do. First, you have the foundation, the diaphragmatic reset. Moving the breath from the chest to the belly is the non-negotiable first step. If you do nothing else, do this. Second, you have the preparation, the quiet cuff technique and the hydration connection. You ensure that when you measure, you are hydrated, silent, and positioned correctly so you get the truth, not a false alarm. Third, you have the interventions, the rhythmic box breathing to calm the heart, the extended exhale to sedate the nervous system, and the nasal humming to generate nitric oxide. These are your active tools to lower a spike. Fourth, you have the lifestyle integration, the walking rhythm to keep arteries soft, the post-meal stroll to manage blood sugar, and the left side reset to help your heart in the morning. And finally, you have the mindset, the 3 and done rule to prevent anxiety from sabotaging your progress. You do not need to do all 13 of these things tomorrow. That would be stressful, and stress is the enemy. Pick one. Maybe it is the water in the morning. Maybe it is the humming while you watch TV. Try it for 3 days. See how you feel. Watch the numbers. Then add another. Health at our age is not about grand gestures or running marathons. It is about small, consistent adjustments to the machinery of the body. You have the controls in your hands and in your lungs. I'm Dr. Ben Harris. Thank you for giving me your time and your attention. If you know someone who needs to hear this, perhaps a spouse, a sibling, or a friend who is struggling with their numbers, please share this video with them. It could change their life. And do not forget to subscribe so you never miss a guide on how to age with strength and confidence. Breathe deep, drink your water, and I will see you in the next video.